Have you ever played a game that reminds you of a particular season? The calm, misty mornings of spring? The brown and orange hues of fall? The holidays and freezing temperatures of winter? What about summer? Specific worlds or beach levels that have a summer-like theme to them, accompanied by pieces of music that also manage to do the same. Maybe even whole games whose entire atmosphere is centered around situating the player in summer, getting you comfortable with the sun's heat, the sandy beaches, the clear blue skies, and turquoise waters. The same feeling can obviously be applied to every season, and by extension, game combination that manages to replicate the same emotion in a player. It's nice that we're able to reflect on these memories because it allows us to associate a time of year to a particular experience. This concept is applied to the game I'm going to be discussing today. I played this game for the first time in 2024, and it's slightly ironic because I played it during the blistering cold of the winter in January. Though I definitely won't remember this title for the winter, rather the feeling and the realization I had that I wish it were summer. This, of course, is none other than Wave Race 64, one of 8 launch titles for the Nintendo 64 back in September 1996. This game was brought together by the collective consciousness of director Shinya Takahashi, producer Shigeru Miyamoto, programmer Kaizo Ota, and composer Kazumi Totaka. At its core, Wave Race 64 is an arcade-styled racer. It's akin to point-based elimination racing games you would tend to see in arcades from the 80s to the early 2000s. But instead of racing on land in a car or a go-kart, this time you're racing jet skis on water. And it's all thanks to that Kawasaki license. While the game contains aspects of 2-player multiplayer, I believe that the game shines its brightest in its single-player aspects. We've got 4 game modes to choose from: Championship, Time Trials, Stunt Mode, and the previously mentioned 2-player versus. So with that intro out of the way, let me take you through an N64 classic that manages to replicate summer to perfection. Starting off, regardless of which game mode you play, you first have to pick your racer. We've got a whopping 4 to choose from here, all with varied stats to differentiate themselves from one another. From left to right, we've got Ryota Hayami from Japan. He's your standard all-around neutral racer with solid handling and excels at long and wide turns. Next, we've got Ayumi Stewart from the US. She's the lightest racer with the fastest starting speed and easiest turning. Then there's Miles Jeter from Canada. Respect. He's got decent to mid handling and excels with sharp or tighter turns. And lastly, we've got David Marner from the US, or as I like to call him, Big Dave. He's the heaviest racer who has the most difficulty turning, but he makes up for it thanks to the fact that he has the highest top speed out of the 4. Outside of the 4's unique stats, you're also able to individually customize your handling, engine, and grip. Having the opportunity to customize the racer's stats is extremely unique in my opinion, and gives a good amount of options and variety for anybody's playstyle. Moving on to the main appeal of the game, racing. The primary game mode you'll be spending most of your time playing is Championship, a series of 6 to 8 courses depending on difficulty. Normal takes you through 6 courses, Hard takes you through 7, Expert takes you through 8, and Reverse also takes you through 8, but as you can imagine by the name, all the courses are played backwards. As I mentioned not long ago, Wave Race 64 is built off of point-based elimination. You score a set amount of points in each position you finish in, 7 for first, 5 for second, 2 for third, and lastly 1 for fourth. Each subsequent course will have a point threshold you will have to meet in order to progress through the championship. And as the difficulties increase, so do the continuing point totals. If you fail to meet that mark, then you'll be disqualified, resulting in a game over. In terms of staying in the race and securing your position in the next race, you gotta maintain your speed. This would probably be the best time to bring up the game's controls, and yeah, talk about a surprise. I'm used to Mario Kart's controls, which are relatively primitive, and you only really need to focus on character weight and item usage, especially in earlier titles. Meanwhile, Wave Race entirely depends on controlling your center of gravity while cutting through the water. You can't just flick the analog stick back and forth, you need to position yourself properly so that you can balance your racer without falling off your jet ski. Now, I may be picturing the controls to be a bit more difficult than what they actually are, but what I'm trying to say is Wave Race's controls are a lot more looser than Mario Kart's stiffer controls. The water physics are probably the game's biggest flex and are incomparable to any water racing game I've played. Modern Vintage Gamer made a video that covers just how the N64 could simulate waves as well as it did. Turns out, the game renders preset wave patterns depending on which quadrant of the course you're currently on, which to me, playing this for the first time in 2024, absolutely blew my mind. You're barely even able to distinguish that the waves load in sections when you're playing this on a television. Throughout the courses are red and yellow root buoys. In order to build up and maintain top speeds, you need to consistently pass through these buoys for 3 consecutive laps. As the difficulties get harder, so do the buoy placements. They'll roughly remain in the same spots, but sometimes they'll position them in harder to reach locations, which only gives the player incentive to strategize how to navigate through the course. And as for the courses you'll be racing through, well, you've seen some of them already, and we have 8, technically 9 distinct locations to cover. Dolphin Park allows you to warm up and get comfortable with the game's controls. Sunny Beach is the first racetrack, and while a basic loop, it's still a pleasant race. Sunset Bay's gorgeous orange sky and darkened palm trees draw you in, like the final race of an evening. Drake Lake sees you cruising on a crystal clear lake with a thick layer of fog that slowly dissipates with each lap. Marine Fortress is a rough and choppy ride, giving you a taste of the game's difficulty. Port Blue's tight corners and alternate paths build off of Marines, but it's damn near impossible to catch up in harder difficulties. Twilight City takes place at night, with glowing buoys and city lights to compensate for the darkness. Glacier Coast sounds like the most dangerous concept ever and makes for one of the most difficult tracks to master overall. And lastly, there's Southern Island, a beautiful set of isles placed between docks and piers, which concludes every championship tournament. Overall, Championship is the best and easily the most replayable portion of Wave Race 64. When comparing it to other racing games at the time, the scaling and difficulty is very apparent, but is properly handled. The expert and reverse difficulties are quite challenging. The 3 CPU racers and course layouts vary depending on difficulty type, and due to races being structured through a point-based system with a chance of you being eliminated, it allows for a lot of replayability. Alongside Championship, you also have access to 2 other game modes, Time Trials and Stunt Mode. Time Trials are relatively basic and are just as you think. Here you can practice on each course and aim for your best personal times, be it best individual lap times or 3 lap times. Your time saved to memory, which means unless you go into options and manually delete your records, your best times will remain on the cartridge. And since these times are stored in memory, you can take the memory pack out of your console and bring it to a friend's house to compare. Yeah, nobody's doing that in 2024. Then there's Stunt Mode, another one of Wave Race's unique attributes. One of the main components of this game that completely went over my head on first playthrough was the ability to perform stunts. Watching trailers and pre-release ads showcase stunts being pulled off, but I had zero clue how to do them myself. Turns out, if you read the handy-dandy Wave Race 64 manual, then you'll get a better understanding of how stunts function. With all the stunts, you'll need to properly control your center of gravity by performing a series of inputs, which then result in a unique stunt action. For example, if you hold up on the analog stick while going up a ramp, then holding back while you're mid-air, you perform a backflip. There are a total of 8 different stunts you can perform, and that's the main premise behind Stunt Mode. You can play on all 9 courses, but instead of racing, your main goal is to obtain a high score. Layouts of the courses are altered into 4 sections to include point rings and checkpoint gates. Passing through both of these net points and extending your timer so that you can progress to the end. However, if you run out of time, then you'll have to restart. No big deal. Alongside point rings and checkpoint gates, you can additionally gain a lot of points by performing stunts. You're rewarded points for both performing the stunt and your precision in successfully landing the stunt. Basically, the higher the risk equals the higher the reward. According to the manual, the key to achieving your highest score in this game mode is to, quote, choreograph your stunt routine. When you're comfortable and are relying on muscle memory for your stunt inputs, you can plan out a routine in your head of what stunts you want to perform at set points of the map. That way you can optimize your run to achieve a high score. While I never played much of time trials, both extra game modes offer a break from the sometimes stressful championship and are fantastic single player experiences that add to the overall package. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that if you manage to perform all 8 stunts on Dolphin Park in one fell swoop, you can unlock the Dolphin to race on. Unfortunately, you can only use the Dolphin on warm-up mode and you're not able to use it during the championship races, which just would have been amazing. When it comes to the game's visuals and soundtrack, they're obviously not going to be the greatest of all time, but for the time, they were certainly outstanding. Despite growing up with a small handful of N64 titles, I never grew up with this game, nor did I grow up in the late 90s. Though I am a 2000s kid and I can still acknowledge how polished this game looks even to this day. I played Wave Race to completion on physical hardware, but most of the footage used in this video is used through very legal methods because I wanted the footage to look sharp. Regularly on physical hardware, Wave Race displayed at 240p 30fps, which is great when it's displayed on a CRT TV, which I never had. Regardless, I think the visuals are top notch for the console. Water is animated and colored perfectly, skyboxes and environments are beautiful in tracks like Sunset Bay and Twilight City. Character models haven't aged the best, as you can see in their faces, but their animations are surprisingly detailed, especially with stunts. Then there's the game's soundtrack composed by the one and only Kazumi Totaka. Totaka is one of the more notable composers inside of Nintendo, known for composing tracks from the Animal Crossing series, Wii Sports series, Luigi's Mansion series, every Yoshi game post Yoshi's Story, a good chunk of Mario Kart 8 soundtrack, and of course, his very own Totaka song. Wave Race 64 was Totaka's 7th project with the company. He utilizes electronic synths for the majority of the game's score, along with the electric guitar, piano, and a super prominent bass. The N64 sound chip can't replicate the crystal clear sounds of a synthesizer, but it's because of its iconic sound, especially the electric guitar, that it manages to emit a specific, summery feeling that only exemplifies how this game is a testament of the late 90s. In addition to Totaka's sound, John Houlidan voices the energetic narrator you'll hear throughout your races.
Wave Race. This is the final round. Good luck. 3, 2, 1.
You can clearly hear Wave Race's influence in Totaka's future compositions, most notably with his tracks from the Wii Sports series. Overall, Wave Race 64 is a very short but sweet experience. Championship offers for hours upon hours of replayability thanks to point-based elimination. Time Trials allows you to further improve on mastering your skills for each course. Stunt Mode is a great break from the competitive racing modes, and if you want to test your skills with a friend, then you can both take on the 2-player race. The integration of point-based elimination along with the route buoys makes for a unique racing system that differs from most console racers from the 90s, especially the only major competing racing title on the console, Mario Kart 64. This racing system is one of a kind and encourages the player to strive to improve their skills so that they can move forward to the harder difficulties. Reflecting on my own personal experience, whenever I wasn't playing the game, there would be times in early January when I'd be working or attending university where I'd be thinking about playing the game, simulating jet skis on waves in my head with the music playing. It's a cognitive feeling I'll normally have with games I'm actively playing for the first time. An example of this would be with Final Fantasy VII Remake. The thing with those types of games, plus the mindset I just described, is that I end up grinding the ever-living hell out of the game until I get completely burnt out. but when I realized Wave Race was a much shorter game, I wanted to change that mindset immediately. Despite my urge to play every opportunity I got, I spaced my play sessions out, as any normal person would, so that way I could really look forward to pressing the power button on my N64 and getting fully immersed in the next play session. In regards to accessibility and ways to play this game in 2024, you've really got 3 options. You can buy a physical copy, you can buy the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass, or you can simply emulate it. If you're looking to spend a bit of money, then your cheapest option is to buy a physical copy in saying you already own an N64. Since Wave Race was one of many launch titles, it was one of the more mass-produced titles for the console. Then there's N64 NSO, which is locked behind a pretty steep paywall. And lastly, there's emulation, which is free if you have a computer, and is not difficult to set up in the slightest. I won't link any ways to find what you need to emulate here, but to be honest, it's just a quick Google search away. I'll admit I lucked out getting my physical copy too, as I bought it from a local convention for $35, which came as a surprise, but your best bet is still emulation at the end of the day. As much as I wish I grew up with Wave Race 64, it's still safe to say that for being one of the first games I played in 2024, it's definitely going to end up placing itself as one of my top 10 games this year, and probably a favorite of mine for years to come. Wave Race 64 unexpectedly managed to replicate the feeling of summer in the roughly 20 hours or more I spent playing. If my ramblings from the past 16 minutes have struck you any interest in this game, then please give this game a shot. Honestly, it is one of the most unique titles in the N64's library. And on that note, that concludes the video. Thank you all for taking the time to watch, I'd sincerely appreciate it. And with that, this is Xord64, signing off.